All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Keetha Mercer. I am Director of Community Initiatives and Grants at the Canadian Women's Foundation. I use she, they pronouns. And I am, once again, much like last week, working from my bedroom in Toronto, which is on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat. And just to quickly say, the Canadian Women's Foundation acknowledges that we are working on stolen land and are throughout the country and are working towards reciprocity and good relationships in several different ways. We've recently signed on to the Philanthropic Declaration, including on Aboriginal peoples. We are, as a collective, working on identifying truth and reconciliation calls to action and missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls calls to justice, and thinking about how we can apply that to all levels of our work, including grant making, philanthropy, capacity building, etc. So also on the line here today, I have my friend and colleague, Rudayna. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Keetha. Hi, everybody. My name is Rudayna. I am a program manager on the Community Initiatives team. And I primarily, one of my primary focuses is the Girls Fund, which we'll be talking a little bit about today, as well as the programming we support. So I think it's important to think in terms of, doing that land acknowledgement and contextualizing our work about how our day-to-day work is progressing our mission to work in a way that is working towards decolonization, allyship, and reconciliation. So with the Girls Fund that we'll be talking about, we support programs that have a variety of approaches, about 4 different approaches that we support. So STEM, leadership, as well as physical literacy and Indigenous learning and culture, Indigenous culture and teaching. And I think that's really important to think about supporting that work and the way we're able to encourage and support girls to be involved in activities that connect them to the land, connect them to their culture. And it's really important also that a variety of the programs that we support as well are helping build relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous girls. And so that's really critical when we're talking about fostering relationship and learning and working in better ways together. So I myself am working in Ottawa right now, so on unceded Algonquin territory.
Thank you. So welcome everybody to our second Facebook Live. Today we're going to be focusing, as Rudayna said, on the Foundation's Girls Fund programs and how girls programs are adapting to challenges presented by our pandemic reality these days. And this is part of our efforts to show why it's important to address gendered impacts of the pandemic and highlight the importance of our new Tireless Together COVID-19 response fund. So, you've heard a lot about economic and gender-based violence impacts of the pandemic, and Rudayna is going to give us a bit more insight about the programs that we're working with that work with girls 9 to 13. So our Girls Fund programs support programming for girls throughout the country that boost confidence, work on resilience and leadership skills in a variety of different contexts, including rural remote communities that have few community services and resources. And although most of these programs, like many other programs and community organizations throughout the country, aren't operating in person during this time, we're hearing lots of stories about how staff are working hard to stay connected to the girls in their programs, ensure that they are, receiving information and continue to have their safer spaces to connect with, and also ensuring that they're good and in a variety of different ways, which Rudayna will talk to. So we'll do this a little bit interview style. So my first question to Rudayna is, what are we hearing about the challenges girls themselves are facing throughout this pandemic?
I think a lot of the issues that you folks talked about last week, it's important to think about that at one level, the issues that folks are dealing with in terms of economic instability from job loss or precarious work or essential work, in addition to the psychological impacts of isolation are going to be felt by the youth as well. So maybe I'll just quickly note as well that when we talk about girls programs, our programs are inclusive of trans girls as well as non-binary and two-spirit youth. Just want to make sure that that's clarified. So as we carry on, if we're talking about girls programs or naming all of those different youth who participate, just to keep in mind that all of those groups are included in the programs. So I think we're also, reading about and hearing about in the news the risks that a lot of experts are suggesting and are suggesting we brace for when it comes to increased chances of abuse and neglect. And we're also seeing that experts are saying that there have been falls in reports and suspected child abuse. So some of those existing issues that are also always out in the world, but that are now exacerbated in this particular crisis. Zooming into our grantees and some of the things that we're hearing, particularly from those programs, the grantees who are the program facilitators are really worried about isolation when it comes to girls and the two-spirit and non-binary youth they work with. It's important to note that, they're not going to school, which is obviously something that's going to affect their academic development, but schools are offering so much more to them than just classes. It could be a place where they get their lunches and their meals from. It's where they're connecting with others. So that loss of connectivity and even access to an essential need like meals is definitely a factor of this current crisis. A lot of the programs we support are connected directly to schools, so happening over lunch or before school or after school. So they're like inextricable, and it's with the school closures, it was already pretty much impossible to carry out a lot of the programs. I think it's really sad also for the program facilitators, because the way it happened in the school year for a lot of these programs is they were sort of saying goodbye to their students for March break, not knowing that that might be the last time they see them. And now they never really get to have that proper goodbye, given that so many of the programs run with the school year. So I think that that's really upsetting as well when it comes to the break in those relationships. We're hearing a lot about the digital and technological inequities, and those are always existed and are always a problem that should get our attention. But I think, again, this is another problem that's now being more deeply felt, because while some programs have been able to pivot to online programming, and that's really wonderful, that's not a possibility for a lot of these programs. Some communities might not have strong internet access, particularly in rural, remote, and northern communities. And then it's just a reality of folks' economic situations. There's not necessarily a computer that the youth can access. There's not necessarily Wi-Fi that the youth can access. So that's another problem that's coming up quite strongly. I also want to highlight, in addition to these challenges, because I think it's always important to also think about the strengths of these youth. And we do know that a lot of the girls and youth in these programs, act as sort of babysitters and supports to their younger siblings in the ways that they take on responsibilities and leaderships in their home life. So I think it's really important to recognize that they are also, these compassionate, resilient individuals who are who are really stepping up in some ways in their own households. I was in contact with one program in particular in Nova Scotia. We reached out to all of our grantees in the Maritimes this past week following the horrific attack that happened last weekend. And they were talking about how their program participants were brainstorming ideas for ways that they can help honor the victims and reach out to their families. And so they're just these girls and these youth are really compassionate, strong individuals. And it's just really incredible that in the midst of this crisis, as they experience another crisis, they're also thinking about the ways that they can help take care of others. So I thought that was just really beautiful and worth sharing as we think about both the challenges and the strengths of these individuals.
Thank you. Yeah, really important things to highlight. Can you tell us a little bit about what some of the service providers or the programs are doing to adapt to these new circumstances and continuing to support girls?
Yeah, for sure. I've definitely been really blown away by a lot of the ways that people are moving quickly and sort of problem solving and finding ways that they continue to remain connected. So I definitely mentioned the individuals who have been able to transition to online and do programming. I know one program specifically that we work with in Alberta, they talked about increasing the frequency of their programs. So they're actually touching base with those girls more often, and really trying to help ameliorate those feelings of isolation and loneliness or things like that that can happen with not being able to see their friends and their peers. And the program facilitators, who they often have grown very attached to. I've also heard stories from various grantees that we work with, again, primarily those who work in rural areas, who say that they can't really connect with girls via online, and that's not necessarily an option for them. And their schools are sending home packages, so packages that go out to all of their families with homework and different tools. And they've sort of piggybacked on that and are working with the schools to get their own content in those packages. I've also heard from programs that are doing their own delivery of those learning packages, or sort of a version of a learning package, but also bring it with a brown bag lunch. So again, sort of trying to fill that need that the youth are missing out on, the youth who would have gotten free food at program day to day. And that's often been such an important piece for them to remain engaged in attending. I heard from one program as well that is in conversation with the school about how they might be able to get computers on loan or laptops on loan to their program participants. So like just a lot of like really quickly sort of recognizing the problem and finding all the different paths and avenues that they can take to sort of adjust and adapt to this moment. I've just been really, really impressed by. Some programs as well that are connected to the youth on social media have talked about how, you know, they've even shifted the content of their social media. So whereas before they might have just been talking more about events and sort of things that are happening in girls' day-to-day lives, and they said now they're shifting their content to focus on helping people understand how they can meet their essential needs. So whether it's pushing out information about what the offerings are at the local food bank or other resources, just really committed to making sure that they could support families and youth as much as they can. Of course, it's important to remember the age group of these youth as well. They're 9 to 13-year-olds. Not all of them have emails, and not all of them have phones and those sorts of things. But I've heard from programs as well that are actually in contact with parents and are sending them activities and various things that they think that could help keep the youth preoccupied and stimulated and busy and having fun. So just various points of sort of access and different points of activities that they have the youth engaged in, which is really great.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good point. I mean, community organizations are experts on adapting to situations and making a lot happen with very little. And, you know, I've also heard from a lot of organizations that are, you know, expanding their food delivery services. Like I was talking to one that I know you work with, Rudayna, that used to provide, you know, groceries for the weekend for some of their lower income participants. And they're now expanding that to providing groceries for the week to not only the families that were supporting before, but now families beyond that. And I think like that speaks a lot too when we hear about community organizations having shortfalls in funding, is not just because their fundraisers aren't happening. It's also because they're expanding their services way, way beyond what their programs were originally covering. And like, you know, we've heard of organizations that are like buying cell phone minutes for youth participants so they can participate, even like helping subsidize internet packages for families so that the young people can continue to participate not only in programs, but in schooling. So yeah, I think you highlighted that super well in terms of how these programs are adapting, and like just the idea that, you know, program staff who are themselves at home and trying to figure out things are now offering programs more frequently even than they were before is really incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So another question that we have for you is, why is it critical to continue to give to and support community-based programs for girls?
I think particularly in this moment, and it's important to support any forms of programs and mentorship that can be offered through these different ways that some of the programs are pivoting, particularly because I'm also hearing a lot about how they're sort of shifting the content of their conversations and programming to focus on helping the girls process what is such an inexplicable and confusing moment in their lives, and very unprecedented. So I think even the ways that they're providing mental health resources, it's just really critical. And that's one of the things I love about these programs as well. Like they're sort of looking at the whole girl or the whole youth, the whole person. So a lot of program activities help stimulate academic skills and social skills, but then are also building up these like mental health and resilience capacities, and just the ways that they're really looking at the whole person when it comes to helping the girls develop both as just, well-rounded, like healthy individuals, but also as leaders, is really, really wonderful and something I really personally love. And so I think that's a really important reason to support these programs. Building and nurturing and safe space is really critical. And that's not something that I think girls and youth that age can always find. So being surrounded by their peers, and then all the work that's done to make sure that that is a safe and nurturing space, makes it really valuable. And I think something that really needs to be thoroughly supported. I think that in addition, like the fact that these programs are community based, that the girls are going to be represented in the program facilitators and program staff. So there's a real cultural competency and a real reflection of the youth. And I think that makes it a really important space as well. You talked a little bit about how that 9 to 13 sort of age space is really a critical time to develop those confidence skills. And we know about the ways in which between the ages of 9 to 13, you hear of youth and girls, specifically girls and two-spirit and non-binary youth, maybe moving away from physical or in sports and physical activities, moving away from STEM, moving away from a lot of these spaces that are traditionally considered like for boys or men or young men. So building all of these capacities at this age becomes really important to helping them ensure that they feel that they can pursue the things that they truly love.
Yeah, that's really important. And when we talk about, how we recover and, the gendered impacts of the pandemic and this time, at home with young girls providing childcare, or supporting childcare as they always have, but now in the home more as their parents try and work and figure things out, but also just the social groups that they had in their girls programs. And, you talked about this a bit at the beginning around, not being able to say goodbye, not only to their program leaders, but also to the youth or the other participants in the program. So I think keeping these programs running as an opportunity for young people or the young girls to continue to have these conversations and connect with each other is so important. And you've highlighted it so super well. I also wanted to mention that the Canadian Women's Foundation, along with the Department of Women and Gender Equality Canada and the Canadian Teachers Federation, have partnered to co-lead a Safe Kids initiative, and that's just getting off the ground right now. But it's a coalition of organizations and partners who want to organize, mobilize, and coordinate a pan-Canadian response to the needs of vulnerable children and youth, and also the escalation of gender-based violence, as we talked about in these times of disruption amid the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're currently working on building working groups throughout the country with the goal of meeting nutritional needs and creating food security partnerships. So Rudayna and I both talked about getting food to families that are vulnerable, and particularly youth who are relying on school or program-based, meals and nutritional options. We're also working on coordinating awareness and action around national responses to gender-based violence or family violence, with looking at vulnerable children and youth. So we've talked about this in terms of gender-based violence that women are experiencing in relationships, but also the Safe Kids initiative will be looking at what children and youth could be experiencing in their home. And Rudayna spoke to that a fair bit also. And then this initiative is also working on identifying and addressing the needs to connect children and youth to available social support mechanisms. So, we talked about connecting through schools, connectivity with technology, etc. So the Safe Kids initiative is just getting up off the ground, and Canadian Women's Foundation is proud to be co-leading it as we continue to look at what it means or what this pandemic's impact means for girls and young people throughout the country. So thank you so much, Rudayna, for jumping on today and telling us a little bit more about the work that you are doing with all the organizations throughout the country. And I'm really happy that you were able to reach out to folks and get some, hear from them and what they're doing. It's important to be able to share it. Big thank you to everybody for listening in today. And if you're interested in supporting this kind of programming and also supporting organizations as they navigate these new realities and adapt to the needs of the young people that they are working with, we'd definitely check out our Tireless Together Action Fund, which you can find on the CanadianWoman.org website. So, thank you for being here. Have a really good weekend. Big shout out to all the folks who made it through the week, supporting, family and communities and loved ones and, colleagues throughout. I hope you all have a restful weekend and stay safe and healthy.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Bye.